It's another Manly Monday, and this Manly Monday, this research went on a bit of a deep dive. We're talking about emasculation, and it's really interesting how little information there is online for men about dealing with emasculation. There's a lot of people trying to sell you shit, but it's some stuff on YouTube and then some scientific literature. But a lot of the articles online on this topic are directed at women about how to stop emasculating your man. And this, I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Let's do the health support this channel and then we'll dig in. Because this got complicated really quickly when I looked into it. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/Leanna K. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K. Hopefully the audio problems on Friday's video will not repeat. There's an unfortunate thing where sometimes my mic will overmodulate just a little bit. Like it'll be too loud and it won't show up on the local recording. But when it uploads to YouTube, then it crackles. So I can't prevent it from happening. So hopefully it'll stop now. And that was just a one-time thing. I've turned down the mic sensitivity a little bit. So the term emasculation originally referred to a physical thing. Basically the removal of the penis and the scrotum and the testes, like Game of Thrones, right? Poor, what was his name? Euron Greyjoy or something like that. But that's what it meant. Nowadays, it's much more, it's euphemistic. It's the idea of making a man feel powerless or less masculine. And again, there's a lot more writing about it towards women. I've seen that. Don't emasculate your man. And there's very, very little out there about why men emasculate each other. And, it's a bunch of stuff on Quora. Why do men do this? Is usually at work. And it's like, well, he's insecure in his own masculinity. And that's it. Now, emasculation has an additional charge now because of the whole transgender debate. And there is a reason that the anti-trans groups focused on what is a woman, adult human female, because there is no similar category of if you say you effeminate somebody, that applies to men too. It's a really interesting language thing that's not just about language. This is one of those things that actually are patriarchal power structures. We don't think of a man going, well, that woman's ugly. The uglification of gaming, that's ugly. She's ugly. We don't think of that as defeminizing the woman. We don't think about femininity as something that can be taken and given and traded like we do masculinity. There is no term for the feminine equivalent of emasculation, even though it's very real. We tend to put the blame on women for that. Women are called, honorary guys, or you'll say butch or pick-me's. It's this idea of, you want to fit in with the guys. You want their approval. And that's seen as a bad thing for a woman. Even though, women, people say, oh, she's unfeminine, right? But it's innate. It's just you are or you aren't. There's no external force that can unfeminize you, right? And that comes from the root of the word, where you can't. It's interesting because in areas that did use emasculation as a form of punishment, what they did to women in similar cultures where they cut off her breasts. Welcome to modern video game morals, right? Yeah, I went there. And, as somebody who unfortunately gets everything from my intellect to my morality judged by my bra size and then told, get a reduction if you don't like it, right? It's messed up. And these things don't come out of nowhere, because historically, the power structures were between men. Women may have had influence, but power was an inherently masculine thing. Women who openly seek power are considered less feminine, because femininity is that supportive, nurturing, support character trait that, oh no, you'd never want to be in charge. You'd never want to. And that's where all the articles of don't emasculate your men, ladies. Don't do things for him. It's a mess. And the psychology behind it, even though we don't have those rigid patriarchal structures anymore, like, women weren't expected to earn a full-time wage. That was considered weird. No, that was for men. Women worked for spending money until they got married, right? At least white women did. Or, men inherited property. There's a reason it's still considered weird for men to take women's surnames when they get married. And that connection to power plays out in the psychology and the anthropology of the whole concept of emasculation, to the point that I found a study from 2015 that, and they wanted me to pay quite a bit of money for the main study, so I only have the abstract here. It's called People Judge Male Sexism More Leniently When Women Emasculate Men. And they did multiple studies. They did one study that found that a man's sexist remark after, or as I say, buffered against the emasculating effect of his threat to his masculinity from an ex-girlfriend, that was more excused than if the sexist comment came out of the blue, right? They did another study where observers more excuse a man's sexist remark following a competitive loss to a woman. But they tied it to the fact that, they excused the sexist remark because, the man was less manly, which is interesting in a lot of different ways. And they did a replication study. They did their own replication. Good for them. They did a third study to rule out competing explanations for why this was not tied directly to male hierarchy. And they said, we discussed the implication that sexism prevention efforts need to identify and address gender-related contexts where sexism is excused in order for efforts to move towards its prevention. And that's academic ease for saying gender equality programs aren't going to work if you're emasculating men and then excusing that as just a sign of low status. And we see this again and again and again, right? The use of incel as an insult, and then insist that has nothing to do with how much sex a man's having. It's his attitudes towards women. And my response to that is, well, just call him a misogynist then. We already have a word for that, right? The combination, the juxtaposition and link between masculinity, power, and hierarchy, where you are on the intra-sex masculine hierarchy, these things are hard coded into our culture, including feminist language and including feminist messaging. And what this science says is it's not gonna work. In fact, we're actually, peaked again, sorry. We're actually gonna induce more sexist behavior if we don't factor this in. And I also found another study that, because I'm like, okay, let's check this out. It's one study, but there was another study called "Does Powerlessness Motivate Men and Women to Endure Sexism?" And they found that not only did men who felt powerless, and this is a longitudinal panel sample, so it was over time in 4 waves. Link in the description box to both these. This is new. This is from 2024. So grain of salt here, right? But it is sort of a big data set study. So, okay, I'm a bit more comfortable using it. But they were testing whether within-person changes, meaning within the individual, in powerlessness predicted subsequent changes in men's hostile sexism and women's benevolent sexism. And as a reminder, hostile sexism is fuck you bitch, right? Benevolent sexism or hostile sexism, women are gold diggers, women are manipulators, that kind of stuff. Whereas benevolent sexism is women are angels and should be put on pedestals and don't do anything wrong ever. We don't lie. We're more moral. Bullshit, 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 bullshit. And not helpful. The reason it's called benevolent sexism, it's something of a misnomer. It's seen as positive, but it really impacts women in work and entering politics, because the minute a woman does one tiny thing, that's it. You're done. You violated your femininity. You are a horrible shitbag, not worthy of anything. P.S. You deserve to get raped. No, really. They actually find that people with benevolently sexist attitudes are more likely to blame a woman victim of sexual assault. And I wouldn't be surprised. I haven't found anything to prove this because, again, studies on men and sexual assault are few and far between. But based on a lot of history regarding men sexually assaulting men, I wouldn't be surprised to see the same thing. That if people have these very sexist attitudes about masculinity and femininity, very traditional gender roles, then there would be more blame on a male victim of sexual assault. Traditional gender roles are nasty that way. And I'm not saying you can't like the 1950s dresses and pearl necklaces. And, if you want to be a housewife, that's fine. Guy, if you want to be a single income household and you want to make the money and you want the wife to stay home with the kids, you do that, but you better make sure that isn't affecting your attitudes about other things in really nasty ways. And what they found is it indicated that men who generally felt more powerless tended to endorse hostile sexism. Fuck those bitches. Women are manipulative and this, that, the next thing, and they control dating and all that shit. So men who generally felt more powerless, endorsed hostile sexism. We've seen that, right? Now, within-person tests did not, that single-person test, right, did not provide directional evidence linking men's powerlessness with hostile sexism, meaning it's possibly an enduring trait that the powerlessness, we don't know, this is all extrapolation. Either it's like early life attitudes that, impact attitudes, or the men feel powerless because of their relationship with traditional gender roles, as opposed to men feeling temporarily less powerful and all of a sudden becoming a raging misogynist. Like, the suggestion is it's beneath the surface when he's flying high, right? By contrast, women who generally felt more powerless endorsed benevolent sexism more strongly, and a small within-person lagged effects indicated that upward deviations in women's powerlessness in 1 year predicted stronger endorsement of benevolent sexism the following year. So men, it didn't change. But women, the more powerless they felt, the more they started adopting benevolently sexist attitudes, which might be why guys sitting here going, there are so many mixed messages here. You're right. There's data to prove it. It changes. And it is very, very difficult not to take that out when, you're identified by society as a woman. Because it is easy to just conform to that and go, yes, take care of me. Because, it's a safer powerlessness. And there is a feminine, you're seen as more feminine when you're influential. Of, oh, there, honey, I'm going to take care of my man. Oh, that's a good woman right there, right? Completely powerless position, but more aligning with femininity. There's absolutely no way to allegedly voluntarily give up power and be seen as more masculine. You see how the two are tied? And this is why when we go, what is a man? Everybody goes, a miserable pile of secrets, not adult human male, right? Thank you, Castlevania. There's more to masculinity than just merely existing in a so-called male body, right? To the point that they call it emasculation when they remove the body part. And this is why I'm so interested in people going, oh no, you're always the sex you are assigned at birth. Well, historically, that's not true because eunuchs, right? Oh no, that's still a man. No, not considered a full man by the cultures that used eunuchs. Yep. Interesting stuff, right? The idea that masculinity is something that can be taken away by external forces in a way that femininity cannot, because femininity is seen as more innate and masculinity is seen as something that is constantly either earned or defended or generated, right? It's a very, very different structure. You can't just, interchange the two. And this matters. This matters a lot because of the fact that, I'm going to go here, feminist movements have fucked up with messaging that emasculated men. Now, okay, the radicals of the 1970s, they weren't trying to make friends. They were deliberately making a point of being angry. That was a feature, not a bug. But because people now don't, understand what that was, they think it's cool and effective to pull shit like cope and seethe. There was somebody told me about something about incels, and instead of going, I hope you die, it's perish, right? And there's a very, very poor understanding in feminist thought of masculinity as a construct, as a social dynamic, as a social currency. We talk about patriarchy in in ways that are just not at all accurate, like not even how it worked, because patriarchy wasn't all men have power. Its power was consolidated in basically male landowners and men with titles, right? And if you were a serf or, somebody who didn't own property, you were just, disposable. Your labor went to your landowner. You could be conscripted into your local lord's army. Like, you were beholden to the powerful men. There's a reason why when universal suffrage became a debate point, working class women in places like Britain really didn't give a shit about whether they could vote. They were more interested in working conditions and, pay. Because at that point, their husbands, their brothers couldn't vote. So it wasn't equal if they got to vote, right? Or they figured, well, if women get the vote, it's only going to be the noble ladies. It's only going to be the wives of landowners. It ain't going to affect us. And all of this stuff, all of this history is very, very important to understand where we are now. And why masculinity being tied to social status and power and being linked to things like your job and how much money you make makes our current times, where you do end up changing jobs a lot more than you used to. Socioeconomic fortunes rise and fall. Creative destruction is a capitalist market concept, but we talk about that without really looking at the psychology of the robbing of dignity that purely, status-driven masculinity does for men. When shows like All in the Family and stuff like that were out there, even Roseanne. So we're talking like the 70s through the 90s. There was sort of a media perpetuated working class dignity for men, where, he could be down on his luck. He could be out of a job. There's the lyric from Bon Jovi's Living on a Prayer, right? Johnny used to work on the docks. Union's been on strike. He's down on his luck. It's tough. Right? There was a nobility in the working man that isn't there anymore. Is it any wonder that we have a crisis of masculinity right now? That working man's nobility has been replaced by kind of a female gazy superhero thing. Archie Bunker has been replaced by Paul Rudd's Ant-Man, right? And they've tried to do the being a dad thing, but let's face it, all the being a dad things are also a guy with some sort of exciting job, like being Ant-Man. Well, as much as it's a joke that Ant-Man is not a cool superhero, his name's still in the fucking movie. It's not the Wasp Quantumania, it's Ant-Man and the Wasp, right? It's not just the Wasp. And I do think that's why you get these huge culture war fights over especially the Marvel characters. Because there has sort of been a Supergirl, a Batgirl to go to, but because DC superheroes tended to be ideals, they tended to be great people, they tended to be very rich, like Batman is a billionaire, Superman's an alien, Wonder Woman's a literal goddess, these are not regular people. Whereas, Marvel Comics characters, it was the Silver Age, it was much more everyman. Peter Parker, regular guy, had to worry about making rent. Matt Murdock, okay, a lawyer at that time. Well, at that time, lawyers were sort of a precarious profession, but still, there's a prestige for being a lawyer, but it's not billionaire playboy, right? The billionaires, like Iron Man didn't start that way, but they made Iron Man kind of an asshole and a drunk, right? The whole idea of the Marvel superheroes is that they didn't have that social status, but they were still cool. And so that's why whenever you get a gender swap, even though She-Hulk is not a gender swap, she's Bruce Banner's cousin, you get this loss and this attack. And when men feel powerless, the sexism comes out. Now remember, this is not new sexism. That was always there. Women are the ones that start getting sexist when they feel powerless. And I do think that some of these superpowered women were something of a balm, sort of a soothe to men. And there was almost like, well, if I'm ogling a hot woman, that's sort of powerful, and power equals masculinity. Therefore, it feels more masculine. And sure, when you make that seem as a wrong or bad, like inherently wrong or bad behavior, then that creates a real maelstrom inside somebody. You know, it really is the equivalent of keep your legs closed, ladies. It's that gender check, right? And we don't talk about that, right? We know that with women, it doesn't feel good to be told to smile more or keep your legs closed or don't dress so slutty. These are gender checks, right? You're being told you're being a skank, not feminine enough. Go put some clothes on, ho. Inadequate woman, male tool, right? We don't talk the same way about what gender checks do to men. And so, you know, what is the male equivalent of smile more, right? It's something like go out there and make money. Go out there and get a job. Go out there and take care of me. Look after your kids, not in the way of be a good, emotionally supportive, nurturing father, but bring home money, right? That is the keep your legs closed and smile more for men. And that is the stuff you see, you know, be handy around the house, you know, fix things, go lift heavy things. And we talk about how that's emasculating for men, but we say to women, don't do it. We don't say to everyone, don't do it. And that's very interesting, isn't it? Combined with the fact that it still is seen as okay that if a woman beats a man at something, if a woman wins a competition, society sees it more acceptable for a man to go, oh, you bitch hoe, or you slut. You saw, like, it's really amazing the insults that come out of guys in that moment. I'm somebody who's, you know, been on the receiving end of a lot of them in my day. It always has to do, it's the opposite, right? I get called a slut for shit that had nothing to do with sex, and then the bread tubers come along, and now I'm a femcel too. Like, which is it? Would everybody stop obsessing over what I do in that regard? It is not that exciting. I always say, I don't kink shame, but I am kink confused. And what does me being a slut have to do with me just beating your ass in Mortal Kombat or Soul Calibur? For fuck's sake. You know, what does how much sex I do or don't have to do with my attitudes on Mortal Kombat again, right? Like, it's just so, that's what you go for women at. Whereas men, it's incel. Involuntary celibate equals not a man. Oh, but it doesn't mean that. It doesn't literally mean, and this is why I like Japanese media regarding depictions of masculinity, because, you know, the real good man, like if you play a Yakuza game and a woman kind of shows interest in Kiryu, he's like, whoa, hey, no, whoa, right? they're not sleeping with everything that moves, James Bond style. Just, it's weird because even in the sort of more LGBTQ friendly stuff, like, Has Been Hotel and Hell of a Boss, there's so much sex in those things. And it's definitely there's a focus on men having a lot of promiscuous, toxic, exciting sex, to the point that there's an entire episode where the walls are ringed with dildos, and it was supposed to be fake sensitivity about thinking a character was gay, but there was a shining example of, oh, you're gay, you take it up the ass, you're less masculine. That was a whole humiliation tactic with Moxie, veiled as was it Moxie? Is that the character's name? Oh my god, it's been a while. I'm 1.5 episodes behind on Hell of the Box. Yeah, Moxie, the little imp guy. And sure, it's easy to peg Moxie as gay, bad pun, like clock Moxie is gay, because he's not out there going, fuck, shit, fuck, hump, like Blitzo is, which is like, holy fucking shit, stop, And they do the exact same crap with Adam on Has Been. And I'm like, stop. Because I'm like, Team Stolas, man. And that character is repeatedly emasculated by his wife, right? If men want to say no, they're emasculated. The idea that men will fuck anything is this weird thing where it's not true. A lot of men do need an emotional connection to feel, sexually comfortable. We talk about sexually attractive, but we don't talk about sexually comfortable. And, the reason that some people's porn tastes may be very different from what they actually do in the real world is because of that comfort thing, right? There could be a curiosity, but they're not going to engage into themselves. And we don't talk enough about men's sexual comfort because of this idea that a real man, a normal man, just wants to fuck everything that moves. And hey, ladies, you better put out or you're going to lose your man to someone who will. Oh, she's a slut, but still. You see how it works? And so I don't agree with the modern left's argument that incel is about attitudes towards women. Because again, we can just call them misogynists. Incel is a term, it's a weaponized term designed to emasculate a man whose opinions you find abhorrent. And it doesn't work. Because if you're right and you're emasculating him, you are giving him more cover in the eyes of third parties. Third parties are going to excuse him dumping the hostile sexism on women because you just emasculated them. We have science that says this is so. And it really is true that men emasculate each other. I mean, let's face it. Hassan Piker, holy shit, the guy who called me a femcel, he is one of those better than you guys, and he's so not. That guy is so insecure, it's not funny. And so he gets away with a lot of sexist statements and a lot of racist statements and a lot of things like that because, well, he's kind of a loser. And he's really insecure and very pathetic, but hey, he's got a lot of money behind him and he gets a lot of views. So it's okay, right? What's the harm? He's a loser. Why should we care? Toughen up, bitch, right? And there it is. Bitch. Who do you call a woman a bitch? Women like me who are insufficiently feminine. Who do you call a bitch for guys? Men who are insufficiently masculine. It's an emasculation tactic again. All this shame is tied to not the morality of what a guy does, of how a guy behaves, but the perceived masculinity and therefore power, and they are not the same thing. Men are allowed to get away with way more immoral behavior as long as they're manly about it, right? Sleeping around, beating people up, lying, cheating, all that stuff, right? As long as they're tough. Tough is the thing you're not allowed to violate. And I am so hoping that James Gunn's Superman movie helps pivot back to a more ironically traditional masculinity that is based on things like acts of service and being a good community member. Oh, what are you, a fag, talking about that? You see? You see how it works? Like, emasculation is everywhere. And really the only way we're going to depower it is if we all see it for what it is and cut that shit out. Cut that shit out, everybody. Guys, stop doing it to each other. I don't care if it's a joke. I don't care. You're hurting your buddies, and they're not going to tell you because telling you something bothered them is emasculating. Emasculation is this mind trap that we've put men in and then made women socially responsible for taking it all away. And how do you do that? Oh, you let him do things. You don't criticize him. You give him the power. So men feel powerless, so women are supposed to be powerless too, so that as long as your man is more powerful than you, then you're doing it right. This is a race to the fucking bottom. Complete race to the fucking bottom. It doesn't work. It is never enough. It is never enough. It doesn't matter how much power you try to rip out of yourself and put onto your man. It will be a constant deficit if the world is constantly tearing him down, because there's one of you and an entire fucking world out there. We have to advocate so that the world stops tearing men down. We can't fix him ourselves. We can't. We can't. Doesn't matter what a perfect woman you are. You can't beat the world, right? So interesting to see what about this, and we can do how to de-emasculate yourself, how to masculate yourself. It's really impossible. What it is it's getting out of the masculine paradigm and going, I'm an individual. Do I like myself? Right? It's stepping out of that masculine hierarchy and going, I'm just going to be me. And I'm going to be the best me I can be. And that is easier said than done. Let me tell you. As somebody who just keeps my hair a certain length so people shut the fuck up about it. Oh, it looks so pretty when it was longer. Oh, I like you better with longer hair. You look like a lesbian. Like I look the way I do to minimize comments. That's all. It's just how can I look so that people shut the fuck up? Because I'm a ginger. I get a lot of unsolicited opinions as is. So, that's the way I kind of relate to all these bullshit masculinity checks. Like, I hear from guys all the time of how friends of theirs on Facebook are putting up this shit about, incels. And I don't care how many times you redefine that word. Men hear incel and they hear men who don't fuck enough. And because the proper guy is supposed to be fucking all the time, and most guys don't, because it's a ridiculous standard, they're like, she's talking about me. We have to stop this. We have to stop this, and we need to start saying to other people, look, this is not okay. Stop the generalizations. Like on our Discord server, and apologies, I forgot to do the Patreon Discord last week, but on our Discord server, we don't do generalizations of anybody. Like we moderate it precisely because of this. Because men, especially white men, but the masculinity thing really affects Black and Hispanic men too, and Asian men and South Asian men in all different ways. And so we have to check generalizations about everyone so that we can protect that sort of invisible discrimination that we get regarding men, because it's seen as the privileged group. And it just doesn't work that way when it comes to shame. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/Leanna K. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K. Thanks for watching. Your support is greatly appreciated. Keep those positive comments coming, the useful comments coming, the insightful comments coming, even if they're critical. Thanks for watching. Manly Monday.